person beside you's gonna do a great job too. You clue her in and everything.
What's that?
Oh, you. She said she's gonna write it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Powers, before we get started, I want to congratulate Mr. Dodd. I forgot to do this a while ago because his daughter made the homecoming court.
Oh,
So
yes.
he'll be escorting her right on the
Right,
floor.
yeah, that's
That's
right,
awesome.
yeah.
You want us to be there to serve the wave or something when you come out? Oh, good. That's exciting.
That is.
Who are they playing for homecoming?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, I know that, but I don't know it.
I should know that. I think I had it right here. I hope I
Where's
have
Johnny?
it. We can watch you.
Oh, okay. How do you cheer for them? We can watch you. Sounds great.
It's either that or Willy Wonka.
Okay, we're ready to reconvene and going into the State of the District, Part 1.
Are we gonna take care of?
Oh, very clever, Nels, I'm sorry, thank you, thank you.
Sherry, you want to come up real quick on the vote on that item and then Amy? Amy, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd, for reminding us, thank you, Sherry, for
A minute
that.
and a half.
Thank you. I'd like to request the approval of the addendum to the communication system user agreement with Citrus County.
I move approval.
A second.
It's been moved by Ms. Wright, seconded by Mr. Dodd to move approval of the amendment to the Communication Systems Agreement. Further discussion?
I would just say that I did review it. I looked at it with Ms. Sarnich too about some questions I had, and she answered all my questions, so.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we go back, yes. Okay, that's right, yes, let's close the special meeting of the Citrus County School Board and go back to the workshop.
Right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Wait. It's
Good
still,
morning.
it's still morning.
Is it still morning?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, good morning. That's right.
All right. We're excited to be here today. We have our Ed Services team that are going to be presenting the State of the District Part 1 for you. But we're kind of doing things a little bit differently this year. The first slide I have here explains to you the timeline of how we're going to be disseminating out information to you through our State of the Districts. So today, September 27th, we're doing State of the District Part 1, which we're going to talk about the district and school grades. We're going to talk about the ELA and social studies data specifically. And then our district and school initiatives and what we're doing now due to the ELA and social studies data. So that'll be discussed today. At our next State of the District, that'll be Part 2 in October, that's going to be where we'll concentrate on the math and science data that link to our district and school grades, as well as the other data like our advanced placement, IB, ACT and SAT, dual enrollment, industry cert, and then of course also the district initiatives and school initiatives that we are doing pertaining to math and science. We will talk about at that State of the District. So we're breaking it up. The third one I wanted to discuss with you today first is the student services piece and technology piece. In the past, they have made presentations, but we wanted to know from you if you would like for their pieces to be added on to the State of the District Part 2, or would you like them to separately present their annual address to you? Would you like that as part of the October meeting, or would you like that to be a separate piece on another date?
Personally, I know when I'm looking at something, I like to have everything all together so I can get a perspective on everything. So to me, being part of it would be really great. I would agree.
So you'd like them to be added on to the October 25th when we talk about the math and science piece and the other data?
You're talking about the technology and students.
Student
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
and technology.
I think they're integrated
They are.
so much, especially now more than ever, that at least certainly technology side of it, I think, is integrated so much. And you might as well throw the student services in there.
Okay, all right, so like I said, today we're going to be concentrating on the overview of the district and school grades, as well as the ELA and social studies pieces.
The only thing too, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but if there's maybe a way to sneak in there, do we have any data that we could be provided to or information regarding CERMI? you know, or Cerny and Crest, and I guess I'm thinking of our alternative settings. And I don't know that it has to be at that moment, but you know, I guess I'm thinking a lot of those things we're going to be reviewing at that time.
Well,
What we do with Cerny,
Yeah.
every year, my staff does a critique evaluation of services, and we bring that to you in January.
Okay, then
And
that's
early for us to try to bring that.
Then that's fine.
Yeah, I think so, because they're
Yeah.
sort of a separate entity.
And Mr. Mullen, I forgot.
But
the time
their
frame.
data, the students at Cerny, their data, and the students at Crest, their data is in this data. So this is, you're
Because
still
they
looking
get
at.
integrated back into the homeschool. Yeah. Okay, thank you, that's,
Part of the district data.
thank you.
All right, the box on the right there is the way that we're going to be presenting the data to you. We're going to start with the what, which is me just telling you what our data is. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the why, how we can analyze the data, and then the now what piece is going to be where you're going to hear about our district and school initiatives and action steps that we are doing because of the data. All right, so starting with the what, and again, remember we're really going to be concentrating on the ELA and social studies when we get into it more so. Here's just an overview of our school grades where we had 4 A schools, which were all in elementary. We had 11 B schools, 4 C schools. And you see that there. We had 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 2 high with our C schools, and then our overall district grade of a B. So this is an overview, but it also kind of gives you some history of our years before with our school grades.
And are you going to give hard copy? You know, I always ask a hard copy. Are you going to give hard copy of this?
If you would like it, absolutely. Okay, here is just a pictorial view of the districts amongst the state, what grades they each got. Now, last year, there were 11 A's, and we went now to just 3 A's in the district. I'm sorry, 3 A's in the state. So Okaloosa, UC St. John's, and Sarasota were the 3A districts. We are part of the 35 B districts, and you see there was 14 C's, 2 D's, and there were no F's in the state of Florida. So it kind of just gives you a little pictorial view there of, you know, what, how the state looked when we looked at the different district grades. Hamilton and Jefferson are those 2 D districts. I didn't put that up there, but just for your own information. This is a nice graph that kind of shows the differences from 2006, when we started doing these school grades, all the way to now our 2016. We had to break it up into 2 different charts because when we started our new assessments with FSA, we are now scoring it differently, and our school grades are being calculated very differently. So we're having to really kind of start over when we're looking at growth and a trend or patterns, because we're going from a point system to a percentage of point system. So from 2006 to 2014, you see there, you know, each one of those red squares are our Citrus County schools, and then you see the state average is that gray box at the bottom. And you kind of see how we kind of always have remained above the state and kind of follow those trends and, you know, going up and down. But then over in 2015, where you see Citrus County schools again is the red box, we continue to be above the state. In 2015, we did have an A district, 62%, that was higher than the state. But remembering though, when we got that last year, that was without learning gains as part of the whole equation. And I'll be showing you that equation in a minute. But as you can see down there, I have it as the asterisk at the bottom. 2015, that was percentage of points out of 700 total points, because we didn't have the learning gains. We're now in 2016, we have all the components to make up the school grade, including the learning gains, and that's why we have it, you know, up to 1,100 total points, and they find the percentage, where we had 56%, which equaled a B grade.
Ms. Crowley, I notice if you look at 2006, we're very close to the state, and obviously in 2015-16, where this is the first year, we're also pretty close to the state.
Correct.
But the trend has been, for the most part,
Separate.
a very substantial separate almost every year
Correct.
by the same amount. Is that any indication, or maybe it could be an indication that this again shows the difference of a piloting year of testing
Absolutely.
and what potentially we're looking at? We shouldn't overanalyze this year's data to a point of saying, we're gonna make major corrections now as a result of the data we have in front of us.
Right. If we were to look at this as, what the learning from our past, you would see that, yes, you're right, in 2006, notice that that data is not connected with the 2007, because again, that was a piloted year with a different, they did not have the total amount. You see there, the 2006 total points was at 600, because again, they did not have the learning gains, because it was the new assessment at that time. So, and we were very close. But then you see the trend after that point on, 2007 to 2014, we do have a substantial difference when we look at ours compared to the state. And I would say, Citrus County expects to do the same. We're starting again from, with this new assessment. We are close to the state right now. We're still slightly above, but we are there. And we're anticipating that starting from 2017 on now, we're going to see that those gaps growing between us and the state.
But we don't want to be lulled into thinking that because we don't know.
We want to prepare as well. And that is why we do analyze this data. And today we're going to show you how we analyzed it and then what initiatives our district and schools have done this school year to, to prepare and to, of course, always try to do better. That's something Citrus County, I think, is why we always do it, is because we go through this process and we analyze our data. Even when we're above the state and really great in something, we still know that there's room for improvement and want to, keep shooting up. Okay? All right, here's how the district grade is made. This is the same, we can call it a report card. This is the same way that all of our schools get their school grades. So we have it broken up into the different compartments. I did highlight in yellow the compartments that we are going to really focus in on today, which would be our ELA and social studies. But I did want to give you just like an overview here of what the components are. I know last year, Mr. Simon did present this to the board, knowing that this is how our district grade and school grades were going to be calculated in the future. So here you've got the different subject areas. It's 4 achievement components. You've got ELA, which is a combination of reading and writing together in one score. You've got your mathematics, which includes not only your 3rd grade through 8th grade FSA mathematics, but it also includes your math EOCs in that data. So it would be your Algebra 1, your Algebra 2, and your Geometry EOCs. Your science data there is going to be your 5th and 8th grade science, as well as biology EOCs. And then your social studies one is going to be your civics EOC and your US history EOC. Those are combined. So as you can see, there's 4 achievement components, and this is just showing us the performance on statewide assessments, including, like I said, all those assessments I talked about, EOCs and FSAA, that's our alternate assessment, is also included in this data. Okay, you see there underneath that, achievement, 56% for ELA, 61% in math, 61% in science, and 70% in social studies. That's measuring the percentage of full year enrolled students who achieve a passing score. So in the whole district, 56% of our students that were enrolled in our district somewhere got a 3 or higher on that FSA ELA assessment, and that's grades 3 through 10. So as you can see, as it goes across, that's how those are calculated, just the percent of students that were enrolled in both of our surveys and took the test in our district somewhere, that they're contributing to that score. Now, as you see underneath in ELA and math, that's where the learning gains part comes. And here's where our district really has looked at and said, okay, this is something where we need to focus on and really target a lot of our efforts. The learning gains under ELA and math, you can see there, 49% and 56%. So in ELA, that means 49% of our 4th through 10th grade in ELA made a learning gain. Okay, and I'm saying 4th, not 3rd, because our 3rd grade are not part of that learning gain because they don't have a previous score before that. That's the first year they take the test in 3rd grade. So it's 4th through 10th grade. So the state this year has defined learning gains differently than in the past. They've made it more complicated, actually, to get a learning gain. In the past, to get a learning gain, if you remained a 3, or you remained a level 4, or you remained a level 5, you got a learning gain. They counted as a positive for the school and for the district. This year, they have changed that, where if you remain a level 5, fine, you still are a learning gain. But if you remain a level 3 or a level 4, you still have to improve within that level. And that is a huge thing of statewide, that really did affect our percent there. because our district was always very strong in our learning gains. That number was something that we really always, were pretty high in the state. But when we are now looking at our level 3s and level 4s also needing to make progress and improve within that level, that is something different now. So that did, affect our score, and we are now having to focus and saying, how are we going to address that and make sure that we can improve in those areas. Underneath, I'm sorry.
How much of a learning gain, how are we going to measure how much they've improved? I mean,
Look at the scale score.
if you're a 4, would you have to be a 5?
No,
Okay.
they're going to look at the scale score. So it's a 3-digit number that, that each level, like your level 1, your level 2s, all the way to level 5s, there's a breakdown of what scale scores constitute a 5, what scale scores constitute a 4, and so forth. So what will happen is, and each year, it does adjust. There is a difference, what constitutes a level 5 if you're a 5th grader versus a 4th grader. Now, what will happen is they'll look at your scale score. If I'm a 5th grader, they're going to look at, okay, how did you score in 4th grade? And then how did you score in 5th grade? So there are ways to make a learning gain. One would be is if you improved a level, if your actual scale score allowed you to go from a level 4 to a level 5, that's an automatic learning gain. But if you stayed a level 4 in both years, then they're looking at your scale score, and your scale score had to have improved at least a point, within that level. So you had at least a point, right? But you had to remain a
It's
level.
an increased rigor too. You're
Right.
not taking the same 3rd grade
But
test.
Correct.
that's the other thing though that doesn't make sense about the way they're doing it, because they're saying a learning gain is 1 point, but it's not the same test.
Correct.
So by saying if you were giving them the 3rd grade test again and they're in 4th grade and they made the same points, I could say that's not a learning gain.
Right.
I would argue to say even if they made 10 points more, they were given the same test, it's not a learning gain. They're taking a test that's set up for 4th grade. How can the state not say that it's for the same grade? That's like saying, well, you got an A last year, but this year's A isn't a real A, because you really needed an A+ for us to count you as a learning gain,
With different content.
because it's an entirely different test.
Correct.
So I know everyone in this room feels probably the same way, but this is a real problem, because they are saying no longer a learning gain is a student that achieved the same level, and maybe a better example is a B. If they got a B last year and they got a B this year,
They
the
didn't
B's,
learn.
they didn't learn as far as what they're saying. They would have had to have gotten an A, the state is saying, for them to have now gotten more. Or they would have had to have gotten a B+. I mean, that just under any other measurement would never have been acceptable.
Especially when they say that 3 is considered, where you are successful or proficient. You know what I'm saying? Is that
Right.
level 3? I can understand how they have made, like, your level 1s and 2s, that you've got to show improvement within that level 1, or at least go up to the level 2, and then the level
I
2 to
could
the 3,
agree
because you
with
want to
that.
get them to level 3, you want to close that gap. But we definitely have gone around and around with the state with that, wanting to know, and we're not the only district asking about that. Why is it with the level 3 and the level 4s? It's proficient is proficient, and it is different content, it is a higher level content. And like you said, if I got a grade B last year and a grade B this year, I did learn. Because I obviously learned that other content, and I passed, I learned.
You held
So,
on to what you had last year. I think that's
Right.
remarkable.
Well, and plus, you're being graded on that year's content, not the previous year's content. Now, but they do apply that rule if you have a 5.
correct, level 5, they do
So
not.
if I got an A, doesn't matter whether it was a high A or a low A, if I'm a 5, I make learning gains no matter where I am in a 5. But if I'm a 4 or a 3,
Mhm.
I don't get learning gains. So clearly, levels of C's and levels of B work, the state is not giving value to
Right.
from year to year. And we don't do that in our classroom. If we had a parent come to us and we told them that this is what we're going to be grading you on 11th grade, they would absolutely go crazy.
See, Thomas, to make sense, this is probably, you would have to consider this a business model, not a kid model. It looks good on paper and sounds good when it's said.
Yes. Okay, so as you can see,
And
we
I
had
don't think I'm
49%.
By the way, I apologize.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. So the learning gains, as you can see, we had 49%. We definitely were stronger in our math, as you can see, as a district compared to our ELA.
Go
The-
math.
Yes, go math. The very bottom, the learning gains of the bottom quartile. Okay, that's definitely an area where we really needed to address. So what that means is, at every school, well, this is the district, we pull the bottom quartile students, it's the bottom 25% by grade level. So you basically take, if I work at Citrus Springs Elementary School, I'm going to pull all my 4th grade and all my 5th grade, look at their previous year's scale score, okay, put them out in Excel and put them in order from the highest to the lowest and rank them, percentile rank them. And that bottom 25% of those students, how they scored last year, that's the group of kids that make up that bottom cell there of the learning gains of the low quartile. So basically that one, say a student is in that bottom quartile, that child's score affects that cell, affects the overall learning gain cell, and affects the achievement cell. So with that in mind, you think that one student has a weight of 3 times, if you think about it, versus a child that is not in that bottom quartile. So,
And
you know, just are
we
aware of that.
also have non-English speakers and that sort of thing
They are in
in that
here.
group.
Yes, they are in here.
And one would expect the person who doesn't speak English not to be able to take a test and make a high score on it.
Well, I mean, with ELL, remember, there are rules and there are things in place where if a child is new to the country within 1 year, like has moved to the country, and they do not have to take the FSA ELA test the first year. However, the math and the science and social studies, they do have to take. So, I mean, they would
This
actually.
math is so easy if you don't need to read English.
You don't have to read anything, or in science, social studies. But they used to call it CELA. Now they take the Access to ELLs. It's the same as the CELA test. Their scores from that, if they did not take the FSA ELA due to being new to the country, their actual ELL test does contribute to this.
With education, you know that it takes 7 years for a person to become proficient
Oh,
in
yeah,
a
fluent.
language. But you're saying they let them buy with the first year, but the second year, that,
I believe it's 1 year they're out, and they don't have to take the test for 1 year, and then they have to take it the following.
that doesn't make any sense.
That is only one.
And Ms. Crowd, just from a data perspective, the better proficient our students are in the learning gains and the achievements upper, so as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of say 49, 56, 56, 61. The better we are in those percentages, as you said, the lower quartile has like a weighting of say 3 to 1 or so, but doesn't that get worse the more successful we are on the top? So for every student we are successful in percentage-wise up there, the burden on the lower quartiles weighting becomes greater, I thought, because you have in a school, if the majority of my students are passing, now I have a student that's in that lower quartile. It could be 1 or 2 students.
Okay, no, that has changed.
Oh, that has, okay.
In the past, you're right, in the past, what would happen is that when they would do the bottom quartile, they would eliminate any students with a 3 or higher.
Right,
That is no more.
okay.
Your bottom quartile is your bottom quartile. They could all be 3s if you happen to have a very high-performing school. Okay, so the bottom quartile, and thank you for bringing that up, that is a change with this where it wasn't before. Before, they would eliminate 3, 4s, and 5s. So your bottom quartile could only be made up of kids with 1s and 2s as achievement levels.
Right.
Which you're right, that could only be a small amount. But now that is no longer, your levels 3, 4s, and 5s can be included in your bottom quartile if it's the bottom quartile of that school, or it's the bottom quartile of that district.
But then you're
no matter what
penalized
level they are.
for having high order kids then too.
Well, but those kids just need to make a learning gain, and if they're level 5, learning gain would be remaining a level 5. So yes, a level 4, so it's just those kids making a learning gain, no matter, what definition it is of the learning gain, how they did it, their score, or their learning gain is calculated. It's not just 1s and 2s, it's the actual bottom quartile of the school, however it falls.
So proficiency,
Proficiency is all students, that's the top one. It's
right, but
achievement.
it's not going to come into the learning gains on the lower 25 percentile because you could have 100% of your kids as proficient,
Correct, but they might not all make learning gains.
but they may not all make learning gains.
Correct. Right. Because we don't want students going from a level 5 to a level 3 or a level 4 to a level 3.
I get the
I think is the
concept.
idea.
The problem is because this attributes to punitiveness at the end of the day to teachers and the school systems. and the schools by it affecting the grade of the
This
school.
is the school group.
That's my problem. It's not the data use I don't have a problem with, because I do think that there is value to the concept. It's how they take that concept and now make it punitiveness.
Right.
And that's the problem that I have. It's not the analyzation. Citrus has been analyzing this type of data and trying to utilize
If
it.
there was the monetary value to it, it would be a different.
It would be a different conversation.
Absolutely.
And I would totally see the importance of it. And I still see the importance. My challenge is instead of us now trying to do what's right for kids, we can do what's right for kids, but we still may never get certain gains,
Right.
particularly in the lower 25 percentile.
But I mean, we definitely, looking at this when, and I'll be showing you some slides later on where it shows you compared to the state with our learning gains, this is an area that our county does need to focus on. I mean, we, normally always, like we've showed you, are above the state in everything. But when we are showing that we are below the state in some areas, that's something that we, I think, need to look at and address. Because, statewide, schools are and districts are making learning gains with their bottom quartile. No matter who those bottom quartile are, we need to be
But
doing
if
the
their
same.
bottom quartile
Is
is
different.
lower to begin with, it is much easier off. It is statistically is sometimes easier to bring somebody from a 1 to a 2 than it is to take somebody from a 3 to a 4.
Right, but they don't have to go from a 3 to a 4. They just have to remain a 3 within that level of a 3.
But they would
Go
still,
down,
depending on my
improving.
school, I mean, we've had some schools that the majority of the, substantial number of the schools were making learning gains.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're going to have 25% of your kids that are going to fall into a category that they may not have before.
Right.
Because now they're your lower quartile.
Right, and so now
And
their
ours is
score-
already up.
Right, now their score is going, or their learning gain is going to have more of an impact
But
on
the
the grade.
perception with the state, when you compare it, is we're going to have counties that their lower quartile
Mm-hmm.
are 1s and 2s.
Ours, I'm going
But-
to tell you, are predominantly 1s and 2s.
They are, okay.
Yes. Yes, definitely they are. Okay, so now, yes.
We do know who those ones and twos are, so we can put in lessons or whatever we need to put in to be able to help them.
Absolutely. Those are definitely some of our initiatives that we are doing. Is the first step is identifying who they are. And so then, and communicating that to our schools and to our teachers, and so that they can, of course, I mean, I know we are directing instruction, of course, to everyone, but, you got to identify who they are. We've got things in place where, Performance Matters can be tracking it also, so that we're not surprised at the end. We can progress monitor and target those students specifically on top of what we're doing with everyone.
Each
Okay.
school was provided a list of those names by research and accountability, so that they have that information.
And they have access to Performance Matters as well to keep looking at that information and how they're doing throughout the year.
But keep in mind, that list could change. The students that we identified that are in our lowest quartile at the start of the year, when they take the test at the end of the year, may not be the same lowest quartile. So there may be somebody else that does worse on that test that becomes the lowest quartile.
For the following year. Right. Okay, so as you can see, you go across and we have math, we're going to be talking about another time in science. Social studies, 70% of our students scored A3 or higher. Remember, that was for civics and for U.S. history. Then we go into graduation rate and acceleration success. The graduation rate is lagging data. So remember, this is our 2015-16 grade. However, we use the 2014-15 data for that piece. So it is a 4-year graduation rate where we are looking at the number of students who graduated as our numerator over the number of students in that cohort, okay, for the 14-15. So 77% for that year. Then when you look
And
over...
again, because I know the public has gotten misinformation about this graduation rate.
Okay.
Because the graduation rate required for the ranking is not necessarily reflective of a true graduation rate or a completion rate. Because, for example, and I'm asking the question, but if a cohort graduates in June, he or she would not be part of the percentage of that. So they miss a test and they need to make that test up and they don't get the May deadline, they get the June deadline. Even though they graduated and they graduated with their cohort group, they're not going to be part of that 77%.
Right.
I know that's a common kind of situation we have with students. If a student goes from Crystal River High to Withlacoochee Votech into an adult ed program.
Right.
They're a non-graduate, they're not in this program.
Correct.
If they are now,
Special
they go in,
diploma.
I was gonna say, they were a special diploma track and they do not get a traditional diploma, they are not part of that. Generally in the past, I think the Research and Accountability Department said that if we added all of those completions
Mhm.
back to the system, we're in the high 90s at
Oh,
first.
absolutely.
But yet,
95%
what the
plus.
perception is we're only graduating 77% of our students. And
And you always-
that's what it always concerns me, and again, I know this room largely understands that, but for those out there that need to understand, that's not a true reflection of graduation rate. That is just a formula that they've done where they've drawn a line in the sand, and it's not even at a good place, in my opinion, and they're boxing out all these other people.
And you feel like, gosh, this group is telling all these lies, they're
Right.
lying, and we have to defend it. Because if it goes to the paper and it says the graduation rate is 77%, all a person thinks is 100% mindset,
That's exactly it.
that's all it
My gosh, you guys are doing terrible.
And we know,
23% of your kids are falling through the cracks.
and we know it's 91+%, so I know there's no way of changing their minds, but is there a way of changing their labels or something instead of calling
For the
it?
school grade, probably not, but how we advertise it and communicate it to the community could
I
be
think we
different.
do need to be good at reporting it that way. And whether we call that, graduation completion or whatever, I think we need to make sure that we have captured that back so that we show the
We
success.
need to, because otherwise it appears we're not telling the truth, and we're telling something that hurts us.
Right.
Why would a person do that, tell them something on themselves that hurts?
And I know this started 4 or 5 years ago when they changed the uniform graduation rates and they changed, the formulas, and I think it started with the federal government and has kind of gone down the line. But how can I have any feelings on this?
Now, the acceleration success piece, notice there's a middle school one at the bottom and then the high school one up at the top. And how the acceleration works for the high school, again, it's lagging data, so we are looking at the 14, 15 students. What they do for the denominator for that is going to be the students from the graduation rate numerator. So the students that did graduate, the number of students that did graduate for that 77%, that's going to be our denominator now for our acceleration success for our high school. And so the students from the grad numerator are our denominator here. And then the numerator for our acceleration success are the number of students who passed either an AP test, a dual enrollment course, or an industry cert test sometime within their 4 years of high school. Okay, so a student, for example, say my daughter passed a dual enrollment course as a junior, say, well then she is basically now been put into the numerator for this box. You cannot count more than once. Even if you've passed 10 AP tests, you only count once. So if you've done one of those things, if you've passed an AP test, passed an IB test, passed a dual enrollment course with a C or higher, or passed an industry cert test, from sometime during your high school career, you then count in the numerator there. Okay, does that make sense? And so as you can see there, from 14, 15, 52% of our students that graduated met that requirement for the acceleration success.
I've got a question. On those 3 counties, Okaloosa, St. John's, and Sarasota, those are 3A districts. What is the graduation denominator for them? Do you know?
What was their student, the number, that I'd have to look it up. I'd have to look it on. I can get that.
Is it high? Is it in the 90s?
What is their grad rate?
Yes.
Their grad rate, I might even have that in my, this is on my computer. I couldn't tell you that. I mean, I can assume that, but I don't know that. I don't know what their grad rates are. But I
Okay.
can get it. But I can definitely get that for you.
Because, what Mr. Kenny was talking about is very true. I see, it's hard to defend a different rate than what the state's telling everybody it is. And, that's something that people are very concerned about. So I guess, I'm just trying to have a comparison with, is there something else that we can do? Or are we that,
Rename it something, it just
For the
doesn't
grad
give
rate.
correct information.
so,
I'm concerned about the acceleration success. I mean, I might take several AP tests, or several dual enrollment, or several industry certification. Why wouldn't everything that I take count?
I've got them right here. What's the ones?
Or St. John's?
St. John's would be one of the top ones, Okaloosa and Sarasota.
St. John's is showing at 90.5. What was the?
Frederick.
Sarasota?
Or Sarasota, yeah, Sarasota.
Sarasota is 79.2.
That's interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
And what was in
Okaloosa.
Okaloosa is 80.6.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, Okaloosa, I'm sorry. 82.4.
Yeah, I'm on it.
So it, I'm going to just send this to you. I'll send it to everybody here just in case. But see, that's not, I mean, that's to me still a huge, I mean, we're 77, they're, you know, we've got them from 90 to 80, or 70, was one of them 70, it's 9, I think?
Yeah, one was in the 70s, you said.
So 70 to 90 to have an A.
Yep.
And again, though, knowing, I mean, that cohort could have just happened to have more students on with special diploma.
Well, that's what
I mean, you can't control that. Like, you're not going to not, you know, if they were special diploma at that time. Now, this year, remember, is our last year of using and
There's no more
using
special
special, right? So we're probably going to see a difference in our
State
grad
diploma.
rate based on that. But
So it's
we won't see that though until the following year, because remember, it is lagging data. So we will see that in a year or two.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that would be for our high school. Then when you look at our middle school also has an acceleration success piece where you see there we have 53%, and that's based on the percentage of students that or eligible students who actually pass a high school level EOC or industry cert test. And that would be the numerator. Now the denominator for the middle school is they look at any student that is enrolled they look at how many 8th grade enrolled students you have, that, you know, of all of our 8th grade enrolled students, they look at how many of them in 7th grade scored a 3 or higher on the FSA math. Okay, that is the way that they have it as your denominator.
On math,
We have
just math?
just math, because knowing that the EOCs offered in, of course, in our middle schools are going to be your algebra, your geometry. You know, we don't have like that ELA EOC. It's not an EOC. So that would be, because they were taking, that's going to be the EOCs that mainly they take as an acceleration piece in middle school are your math courses. They're looking at the math level from the previous year. Now this has been a major bone of contention, I will tell you, that we have raised to the state regarding this formula, because there is not one county. We have done, the counties have all talked together and talked about, you know, how they decide what students should take algebra in the middle schools. We have talked about that because, you know, there isn't something set in stone on exactly how every district must decide if a child is ready for algebra. However, I will tell you that there's not one county that says if the student got a 3 or higher, they're ready for algebra. That is not a determining factor, especially when you think of a level 3 is just basically passing, okay? Where level 4 and higher most of the time would be more of your mastery of skills. So the point that the state is using a level 3 or higher on their 7th grade math as the denominator here, and knowing that, and that our district, we had 53% of those students, so more than half of them that got a 3 or higher did pass the algebra EOC or possibly the geometry EOC if that's what they're taking as an 8th grader, or, you know, and so forth. So that is how that is made up. We are looking at some other things possibly to help us with that score as well. But that's relatively new and something that we're really trying to wrap our head around and figure out, or actually talk to the state about how can we make that formula more fair for our districts. Now, at the very bottom, you see the rank in the state of Florida for the 67 districts. Please note, even though we went from an A to a B as a district, we still stayed the same ranking amongst the state. So we still, last year when we were an A district, 2015, we were ranked 22nd in the state. In 2016, we still ranked 22nd in the state, even though we did go down to a B, and that's obvious because there were less A's in the state, only 3 in the district, only 3 districts. So we are still 22nd in the state when you look at comparison of the 67 districts.
how do each of these categories weight? Are they weighting differently than, say, like in 2014? What I mean by that is, like, is graduation rate have a higher weighting on the
Well-
district grade?
Well, before it was just total points. So yes, there was definitely some that did weight, I mean, they just added up the points, and that was the total, and then there was a rubric to say, okay, this amount of points equals an A, this amount of points equals a B, and so forth.
And there
So
were
it was
bonus
total,
points and-
right, you had bonus points, you had, yeah, all of that was now changed, where now it's a percentage of points. So now, whatever, these all get added together and then divided by the number of components that you had enough information for. So it's
And I
weighted now, to me, now it's a little bit more evenly weighted, where before it was just total amount of points, where you could compensate in one area versus another if, you had more points in one than the other.
And I go back to, and I'm using this example just because it's a little cleaner.
Mhm.
You could use this kind of situation with every one of these categories, but what is challenging when we look at a B and to try and communicate that to the public, because we can all pontificate and understand that a B is fine, and it does not mean we are not doing what's best for students. But I go back to the graduation rate, and if you look, for example, in the state of Florida this year, or in that same year, 77.9% on average is what the graduation rate is. But again, what they're not considering is we have a community that's 70% economically disadvantaged. And that means we're going to graduate some of our kids as we're trying to get them through in June. We may be working with them through the summer, and it may be August before we get some of them done. We're going to then try and keep those kids, and maybe in March, we're talking about putting them into a work program at WTC, or maybe November at this time of year. We are focusing on every child and doing what's best for them. That's not captured in any of that percentage.
No.
Now, it used to be, we got bonuses for some of those things.
Well, they would do a 5-year grad rate too. They would do
Right,
that.
and they did a 5-year. Now, 5-year is a very different situation than our 4-year. So it is frustrating because, unfortunately, in the public's view, they just think of a simple A, B, C, D type system. And you guys went down a letter grade. And yet, majority of the things that we are doing, and I say we, I'm really meaning our teachers and our schools and the people out here that are supporting our staff, we don't get to capture that any longer. And so it's difficult when you see a St. John's, for example, and they may be 90%. Well, they didn't have to worry about someone taking care of that student graduating in June or July, because frankly, they have it, I think they're 40% free and reduced lunch. And so they certainly have other people motivating that student. And it's a very different scenario than what we have. So I'm saying that so that the audience understands too, that I think as a board, we're concerned when we see this, because it does not reflect, I think, some of the excellent things we have going on every day in our classrooms and schools.
Agreed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to break down our individual data with concentrating on our social studies and our ELA. We're starting here with social studies, where this graphic here, and they're different than what we've done in the past. Our past graphs, I know, we had the bars and the bubbles and and those kinds of, this is a little different than those. You're welcome. Right. So the chart here is the civics.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
I've
sure
had
it
it.
is.
Love the bubbles.
Civics test.
Amy got stumped.
Yeah. The civics EOC is grade 7 only. So as you can see here, we did pretty well on this. I mean, this was definitely something that we were proud of these scores, especially some schools, for example, Inverness Middle School, making a significant 19-point jump, which is a great jump. And remember, this is not a new test. This is, I mean, our civics and social studies, all of our social studies and science tests are not new tests. Those are not part of the FSA. So we did some major growth here. As you can see, all of our schools are on the left side of the state, which is a great thing, except for LMS did tie with the state. So here you see the percent of students that scored a 3 or higher on the civics EOC. In the box, in each one of the bars is what they had last year. If I made the box green, that means that there was an improvement this year. If the box is red, you'll see some that happens in a few slides later. That means they went down from the previous year. And then if it stays the same, there's no color. So as you can see, LMS had 67% last year and this year. So just a little color coding there. You see the district average is that yellow bar, and the state average is that gray bar. So these are our civics results from the 15-16 school year.
Same test, different kids.
Correct. So it's the same test, but when you're looking at, yes, last year, for example, IMS had 57% score 3 and above. However, this year, 76% score 3 and above. It's a great success. However, you are correct. I mean, it is a different group of kids that is taking the test the second year. This is not, longitudinal data. So it is something that, we definitely consider. However, we did really beef up instruction there, and we really target on best practices and collaboration and things like that we do attribute to the success of these scores. However, we are not going to really know until, we see future scores coming up if this stays consistent.
I can understand why the civics grades or something like with the ELA low, that doesn't make sense to me because civics is a reading test, right? How could the two be so different?
Well, I mean, there is reading involved in the civics test. However, I mean, the content and the standards being tested are civics standards being tested. And also remember, students that have accommodations where items are read to them, if you are a student that receives that accommodation, in the reading test, the passages and so forth are not read to those students that have accommodation because it is a reading test. But in tests like civics and US history, biology, all of these other tests, math, if you have that accommodation, those items are read to them. So that accommodation is being met.
These tests are worthless.
What if it's being read to them? If
They're you're comparing apples and oranges. If you're reading a test, that's a hearing thing. It's not a reading like an ELA thing. So what is the testing?
it's
not-
testing the civic standards.
But it's being read too.
If a child has that accommodation.
Yeah.
That's if the child has that accommodation, that does take place for those students, for these kinds of tests, not
But
the reading tests.
is not being read to them. They have to read it.
Correct, because it's a reading test. And they're testing the reading standards.
Are they testing like the recognition of words, or they're testing ideas?
Well, they're testing many different standards. Some are words, and some are not.
If it's being read to them and it's testing ideas, that sounds okay to me, But if it's testing the actual breaking apart of the words and understanding the words, then it wouldn't make any sense. So,
Well, the reading tests are going to be, it's the comprehension of a text, that you're able to read it and comprehend it and infer and make, analyze basically text. And if somebody is reading it to you, you're basically testing your listening comprehension, not necessarily your reading comprehension.
but you're testing your comprehension, whatever it happens to be.
Right, but there's listening comprehension standards, and then there's reading comprehension standards.
Where are
If
the
they're going to
listening
test that.
comprehension standards?
I'm sorry?
Where are they in the testing, the listening comprehension standards?
They are in there as well. They do have a listening component to the reading test.
Still,
Mhm.
the fact that these are so far apart, to me says there's something totally inaccurate about the testing.
When you're comparing the reading to the civics, is
Yeah.
that what you're saying? Okay.
And I have a question about the civics test. Does it change each year? Does it get more difficult each year?
Changing answers.
Does it, what do you mean, does the
Does
rigor of it?
Does the yes.
Well, no, the standards are, they do provide us a like test map or blueprint, you could say, that kind of gives us an idea of what percent of questions are from each of the standards or each cluster. It tells us also complexity levels, like this percent of questions are at this level, higher order versus lower order. But the standards themselves are, they have not changed for the civics. So I would not say that they've changed.
Is it going to be more difficult next year is my question.
No. I wouldn't think they would tell you that that's going to be a more rigorous test. No, it's going to be the same rigor. It's just, of course, the items might, of course, change because they do item analysis of them and make sure that they are valid and reliable items.
A trick question.
Mhm.
So the civics test is being tested on the Florida Common Core standards?
No, not Common Core.
Oh, they're not done in Common Core. What standards do
Florida does not. Florida actually uses FSA standards. Those are Florida standards. Okay, I'm seeing the smirk that you know this answer already. Common Core, and we do not have the Common Core standards. We use our Florida standards for all of our assessments. However, the NGSS standards are still being used for civics, all your sciences and social studies.
Superintendent, she was such a great hire. No, I say that because there is a very real misunderstanding thinking we're teaching Common Core in civics, and that Common Core, and we're done doing it, and I knew the answer, but I wanted to re-emphasize.
You are correct. Okay. Now, what we did is we provided this data also, of course, to our schools. So that first slide I just showed you with civics is the overall. Here are the civics by cluster. And this is the kind of data that our teachers really prefer, because this actually can help them with instruction. You know, just to know how many of my students got a 3 or higher, okay, of course, I want to know that, but that's not going to help guide my next moves with instruction and what I need to work on and what not. So here that we break it down into the different clusters of, origins and purposes of law and government, all the way to organization and function of government. Now, as you can see here, we have per school, where each school is a different color, and then the lines are the district averages, the black lines there. So when looking at this just as a district overall, we would say that organization and function of government, that cluster of standards seems to be one that overall that is our weakness. Okay, where that government policies and political processes is something that, maybe is one of our strengths. Now, of course, we delve more into this and actually look per standard with some of our district assessments that I know that Mr. Mullen works with the teachers with, and really then can see, what actual standards within those clusters are we really strong in and what do we need to work in. And then what they do with, they have those conversations and can discuss, why is that? Is it our resources that we need to maybe beef up in some areas that we don't have resources for, or is it pacing? Is it that we're not really teaching that piece until after the test, or that's taught at the very beginning, we never hit it again so they forget, or those kinds of conversations then can happen. And
Is this
very
what we talk
important
about,
conversations.
where standards teaching?
Standards-based instruction is
Standards-based
huge.
instruction. And I just want to give and highlight a person who rarely ever gives himself credit, and that is Mr. John Mullen, because it is the very data work that he does in helping provide both the data analysis and the test preps for these that gives the teachers the very knowledge they need and the information they need to be successful. And Mr. Mullen, and this is John Mullen, thank you, because I can tell you, being married to a teacher who often says, well, I'm calling John, because he'll know the right answer of what I need to be teaching my kids. And it is an art that has truly been beneficial to this community. So thank you.
And he works very closely then also with our district TOSAs as well. That we use our social studies TOSA. They have worked endlessly together in breaking down this data and working with those teachers who want to do better and are asking, what can we do? And it's a great, great team. And obviously you can see, I think, in the results that it works well.
So,
I'm sorry.
on that slide, the line was the average.
District average.
So explain that first one, origins and purposes of law and government. When I look at the bar graph and the district average, everybody, all 4 schools are above.
So why would that one be lower?
Why would that be there? I was just kind of looking at, I was
It should be more like at the 38, I believe it was.
I was thinking that, is it based, even if it's on their student count?
Because it is percentage, it is based on student count, I know that. So because when we look at the district average, of course, these are each percent. So when we actually look at the aggregated data of actually every student versus the, percents, it could have been possibly more at one school than another, because I know, one of our middle schools I know has, like 200 something more students, say, than another school does. So, those count more than the other. But I will look at that. But that is, I believe that one is supposed to be at a 38% was the district average when you put them all together. But I will double check that.
I bet it's going closer to the blue line.
And those are the can put in. So that might be that it's, not. But thank you. Okay, U.S. history. So here we have our U.S. history. This is taken, of course, in the high school. So you have our different high schools, and then you have district is in the yellow. We remained the same last year, 67% passing 3 or higher. And the state also stayed 66%. You see Citrus High School had a jump from 67% to 75%, where our other two high schools did decrease from the previous year. Again, remembering it is a different group of kids. Please also know that these U.S. history results, because our district does block scheduling, we combine our December scores and our spring scores together for this data. Because when we get from the state, of course, what they advertise at the end of the year and during the summer is really just our spring data, which is half of our students. That we combine them with the other half for this data that you see here, which is a different number. So we look at this data with each district, with each school, with each admin team. They talk to their teachers about it, and of course they delve into it even more so into this graph where they talk about the different clusters. And with each one of those clusters, there's a with each cluster there is a set of standards. And as you can see, that late 19th and early 20th century was on the lower end when looking at all together. But then we also use this to kind of see what schools are really strong in something and not others, and we can learn from each other with that.
But with regards to AES, and that is wonderful success, that is, there's no question.
Right.
It's
and
a
notice
very
that they
small
were not
number.
Correct. They only had 28 students. Now notice they were not in the overall one, the paragraph before. Now their students' U.S. history scores did contribute to our district grade. But because they did not contribute to the school grade, because remember you must be enrolled in the school for the full year to count towards the school grade. They did not count towards the school grade, that's why they weren't in that piece. But they did contribute to our district grade. So they didn't contribute to AES or to their home school for that subject.
Which almost indicates that we were losing that data in the district for those students. So if a student goes there that's successful, and many of those students are successful or are higher achieving students, certainly better than average. You're saying though we don't get that, no
district
school
grade.
benefits from that,
For
even though
school
half
grade.
of their education in some cases is from one of their home schools.
Yes, for school grade purposes, it does not contribute to their school grade, you are correct. However, it still does contribute to the district grade, and it also still contributes to things like, for example, if the teacher, for teacher evaluation and so forth, that teacher, if they taught them that entire schedule, that entire course, because we do block, they do contribute to that. So this teacher, this U.S. history teacher, did benefit per se based on her success.
But the school...
The school did not, because they were not there for the full year.
And in other situations, the state would say, oh, well, the whole environment of the school is important towards that student's grade, or to that school's grade. And I'm saying, again, reading used to be, well, everybody contributed to reading. And so that student's score was reflective in that school's grade, for example, with reading. But in this case, the other learning that student is getting is not getting credited back to that school in these grades.
And could
Unless
that
they were there
make a
for the full
difference in
year.
the school grade, if it was credited back to the home school, could it make a difference in the school's grade or not?
Say that again, it
Would it make a difference in the school's grade?
if,
Well, you look at AES here, if Crystal
yes,
River, which shows
it would
the
affect their
lowest-
grade. Couldn't tell you, some of them would make a positive effect, some would make a negative effect. But remember though, if you're talking about putting U.S. history scores, because they happen to do very well this year, yes, it looks like this would make a positive effect on them. But remember, Algebra 2, Geometry, maybe 10th grade English maybe didn't do as well, and those would also then be attributed to, and it could be then just a wash.
But I would
You
bet
know,
in that,
we would have to be able to
those
get-
examples, I bet they, statistically, I would think more times than not, they're gonna
Be
benefit.
positive.
The interesting thing is, when it comes to Renaissance, for example, they're gonna go back to the school with those grades.
What if they take,
If they take the U.S. history exam,
not if they take it at Renaissance,
if they
It's
take
not
it at
counted as a
Renaissance,
school
it's
grade.
not gonna follow them back?
it's not part of the school.
But the other grades, I thought it does. I thought we put them back.
Not for the school grade, no, it will not. Like, if they did not take the test at their school, do you know what I'm saying? That they will not. If they are not there for the full year and take the test at, I'm sorry, if they're there if they go to Renaissance and come back and they take the test at the school, it will count for them, the school. But if they take the test over at Renaissance, it'll count towards our district, but it will not count towards that school, that home school.
But if they're But if they're an AES student
Mhm.
and they take the test
Right?
at Crystal River,
Mhm. But they were
because
not
they
there for
did
the
their
full year.
second semester, but they're not there for a full year,
And when I say full year, it's the surveys. They've got to be there for both survey 2, survey 3. Right.
so again,
Mhm.
an AES student that's educated at, say, Crystal River isn't going to get, Crystal River won't get credit for them.
For that one course.
For that course. And so, and I'm using that as an example because I don't know how many of these kids, given the fact that AES is in Crystal River and Crystal Rivers are down.
This was around 20-something students, 25, 26 kids.
So, you know, out of, I think they had, for example, 350 roughly last year. So it's just that, again, these rules that are different, that apply to different situations are not telling us any real story at the end of the day as to the school's grade, which then ultimately will fall back on the district's grade.
Right. If they are staying in the district, then yeah, if they're within the district, they always count for the district grade.
Okay.
Okay, so now for the ELA, here you see the different elementary schools across the bottom, and you've got 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade broken up into the different clusters. In the top corner, you see the overall grades 3 and 5 combined together. We did improve by 1% from 59% scoring 3 and higher to 60% scoring 3 and higher. You see the yellow bars is the district average, where the black bar is the state average. So as you can see, our district average in our elementary always is above the state. And now you can also then see per school how each grade level did. And this is just, and like I said, this data here, again, was broken down even more so for our schools when they were able to really see how their individual grade levels were doing. And again, the schools looked at this data in multiple different ways. They looked at it as, how did my 4th grade do last year? But then they looked at, how did my actual 3rd graders do from 3rd to 4th? Because they were able to then compare one to the other, which is even more so important, because that's where you're talking about your learning gains. You want to see those actual group of that cohort, how did they succeed as they went through the years. Okay, and then when we go into the secondary world, here you see the middle school to the left and the high school to the right. The middle school, we did go down by 2% in our ELA proficiency, scoring 3 and above. In our 6th grade, you see there that the district and the state were the same, where in 7th grade, the district is slightly above the state, and then in our 8th grade, you see there where the state was scored above our district average. So, you kind of see something else going on in our ELA that we're really trying to start focusing on and see what do we need to be doing with our middle school students, and now, as you can see also over here in our high schools as well, with proficiency. So in our high school, we did stay the same. Half of our students in grades 9 and 10 scored 3 or higher, and you see it broken down by school. And you see that 10th grade, we did score below, as a district, below the state average with, passing. And remember, that 10th grade is that graduation requirement. So these are the students, now our 11th graders. So more than half of our students in 11th grade right now are still trying to meet that graduation requirement, that ELA graduation requirement, whether they take the ELA retakes or they take a concordant, which would be SAT or ACT. Okay, so that's where we're at with that one. And then when you see it broken down, I put it all just in one chart here by cluster. You have the key idea and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, language and editing, and then that text-based writing piece. Text-based writing is grades 4 through 10 only. Remember, 3rd grade did not do the writing component, because that writing component now is integrated in the ELA score with the reading. So when looking at this, it was a definite aha of, wow, integration of knowledge and ideas is definitely that cluster that we are wanting to do better in. And that is, our lowest out of all of the different clusters. And so when we delved into that cluster, we actually saw, well, it's definitely a more rigorous cluster of standards. And it is a combination and implementation of key ideas and details and craft and structure. So we really have spent a lot of time in our professional development group is going to be showing you kind of what that integration of knowledge and ideas looks like, and what they have been doing with our schools to really help with that. We did have some key pieces of looking at our language and editing, saying, oh wow, we did pretty good there. And our text-based writing was something that I think we were impressed, we were not so, I don't know if I want to say surprised, but we were excited to see that our text-based writing was stronger than we thought it was going to be.
Can you give me an example of the integration of knowledge?
They're going to give you examples. They're going to, that's going to be their part. They're going to break that down for you and really show you what that looks like. Because what you just asked was something our teachers were asking and everybody was asking. How can we teach it if we don't even know what it looks like? So yeah, they're going to break that down for you and really show you some great examples of that.
Amy, on your previous slide,
Yes.
my question is on the FSA ELA proficiency for 10th grade.
Yes.
That's a barrier test right there.
Graduation requirement, you mean?
For it's a graduation
10th grade.
requirement.
Mhm.
That's only based on FSA, that percentage right there being below the state and that.
Correct. That's that 10th grade FSA assessment.
But it doesn't include the other alternative options for assessment.
Absolutely not. Right.
Do we care whether they pass it that way or another way?
No. Well, I mean, ultimately, no. Like, we want them to have the graduation requirement.
But the state only grades us one way. The state.
In the school grade, they
The
do not
state-
take into concordance scores.
So
However, it does contribute to the graduation rate because then they can graduate based on a
as
concordance.
long as they do it by May.
Well, they have their junior year and all their senior year to then get.
But I'm saying their senior year, for example, if they all of a sudden take the ACT, as we do often have,
Right.
they take it in the summer or they take it after graduation, and we don't get them into the.
Right, but they would have known that they needed a concordant or to take the retakes after 10th grade, so they would have had all 11th grade to be taking SAT or
Right,
ACT,
and I'm-
and they would contribute to
We
the
have kids that
grad.
are continually taking that
Absolutely.
and
And the
still
retakes.
struggle, and they're taking alternatives, and every time that an SAT or ACT comes up, they're taking it trying to
Absolutely.
pass that grade.
Mhm.
But again, the state is only giving us credit if they pass this one course. In this particular example, when they're looking at our proficiency, they're only giving us credit whether it's through the
From the FSA
FSA
assessment, correct.
in the year that they took it as a 10th grader.
Right, all our school grades are made up of first-time test takers.
And the
Retakes are
reason I
not-
say that is, if we're worried about them passing the FSA in 10th grade only, then yes, we want to teach them, in essence, to that test, to be only successful on that test. But as we know, that doesn't tell us the whole story, because we're going to then try and it goes to the second slide you just showed, we're going to be looking on all of those standards to try and get them to pass, whether it's an alternative assessment, whether it's any other way that we can graduate that student. Not that we're worried about them only passing it in 10th grade in the ELA FSA portion of that. And I again state this because it goes back to what Citrus's emphasis has always been, and that is doing what's best for that individual student and not simply trying to have them pass a specific test. And I bring that up again only because I thought your testimony to the Florida Department and during the Florida Department of Education's lawsuit demonstrated that Citrus County is focused on what's right for the student, not what's focused on right taking a test. And I applaud that, but I think we have to remember that when we review this data. This is only one little piece of a student's life.
And you're going to call for just a short recess, about an 8-minute recess, and then we'll come back. And I bet you didn't realize how much all of us love statistics. I think, oh my Lord.
No problem.
But thank you for helping us understand all of this.
Statistics.